welcome to a new vlog and video in cooperation with ReiseJung. We're taking a look at the 5th day on board of the Monarch Countess on the river Seine, and we are starting in Vernon and then we're heading on to Roche-Guyon. These are our two destinations for today, and here on the map you can see our route that we're taking today. We're starting early in the morning in Vernon, and here we started our excursion to Giverny. Maybe you've heard of Giverny. It's a very famous village because it was the hometown of Claude Monet, and of course we're going to take a look at the house and the garden of Claude Monet, another very important tourist destination in France, one of the most visited ones. And here we can see the first impressions of the beautiful garden. Claude Monet had a huge garden here, very beautiful garden, and of course this garden was also inspiration for him for many of his artworks. For example, the water lily pond, his house, but also the rest of the garden inspired him to many of his famous artworks. So of course it is very beautiful, absolutely worth seeing. It's incredibly beautiful, so many flowers, so many blossoms, so many colors. Even in late August, early September, it was green and colorful. There's just one downside, and that is that it is extremely popular. We were there quite early in the morning and still it was very crowded. A view like this was quite rare. Mostly it looked a bit different because there are so many tourists. Here we can see how crowded it is. A lot of Asian tourists, a lot of influencers that are trying to take pictures, but of course Claude Monet didn't build his garden for a huge amount of people, so the paths are rather small, and when somebody is blocking the way to take 20 or 30 pictures of themselves, it's getting a bit annoying, to be honest, but still it is worth taking a look at the beautiful garden of Claude Monet, as the amount of flowers is just insane. You can also take a look at his house. You can see how he lived. That's also very interesting. Of course, it is crowded, it is touristy, but it is also very interesting, so I can recommend going there. But I would highly recommend going there in the morning hours. We were there in the morning and you saw how crowded it was, and the weather was not good, so I don't want to know how it looks in the afternoon with good weather. Our guest had of course some free time there. It doesn't make any sense to have a guided tour there, so we were a bit faster than our guest and enjoyed some typical French cold cuts before heading back to Vernon. Bus ride only takes around 15 minutes. Here we can see the old mill and an old bridge, which is one of the main sites of Vernon. Unfortunately, there was not more time to discover Vernon itself, because we're heading on to La Roche-Guyon in the afternoon, which is a small village but absolutely worth seeing, mainly because of one site, which we're gonna see in a few seconds. Here we are now back on board, and as soon as everybody was on board, lunch started. During lunch we sailed on to La Roche-Guyon, and here we are already docked in La Roche-Guyon, right in front of the castle garden. And here we can see the main reason for visiting La Roche-Guyon, and that's the Château de La Roche-Guyon, a quite interesting chateau. Here we can see the new chateau, and above we can see the donjon, the old tower. Like this it looks like a more or less normal castle, but if we're gonna go to the court of the castle, we can see that there's something special about this castle, because it is partly built into the rock, and that's quite interesting. Here we can see that the building ends directly at the rock, but actually it continues inside of the rock, so now we're inside rock. Here we can see an exhibit from, I think it was a movie or a book produced here. It is a time machine, but here we can actually see part of the history of the castle. This castle has a very interesting history. It was very important in the Second World War, so if you're interested in history, make sure to check out the history of this castle. We continued our tour then inside the main building of the castle. Now it feels like a normal castle tour. We can see the beautiful rooms of the castle. Here Here we can see the library, and here we can see the hidden cinema. But here you can see parts of the building are inside the rock, and that's where we are heading now. This is the gallery that we just saw from below, and now we're coming to the most interesting part, going up these stairs directly built into the rock. And now we're going up to the donjon, up to the old tower. There actually is a connection from the new castle up to the old tower with a very steep stairs just carved right into the rock. So we're now walking through the rock up to the castle. It's very exhausting because those steps are also pretty high, but it's worth it. Here we are up at the old tower, and now we can also go up the old tower, and from up there you have this fantastic view. For me, this was one of the most interesting excursions of the whole cruise. So I've never seen a castle built into a rock, and such an interesting secret way to go to tower at the top. You can see we're high above La Roche-Guyon, high above the castle, and we walked this without leaving the castle. That's extremely interesting. One of the highlights of the cruise for me. Unfortunately, some guests complained about our stop here in La Roche-Guyon. Some of the guests said the village was not beautiful, even though it was rewarded to be one of the most beautiful villages in France. But unfortunately, for some reason, I don't know, most shops were closed. It was a regular weekday, so they should have been open, but unfortunately they were closed. But to me it was still a very beautiful village. And there's also one highlight, the Grotte de la Bière, which is the beer cave. It's a bar inside of a cave where you can try some beers. Unfortunately, also here some guests complained as they didn't have a typical German beer but craft beer, but most of the guests really enjoyed it. And in the evening we had another fantastic show of Valerie and Thomas. And that's already it for day number 5. In the evening we left La Roche-Guyon, now we're continuing to our next destination. That will be the topic of the next video, and here you can see when it will be uploaded and also the name of the song. As always, I'd like to say thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to comment, like, subscribe or share the video link, and I hope to see you in my next video then.